Hi everyone, my name is Jaden, and today I will be discussing the concept of verbosity and how it is age related. Do you have an older adult in your life who can't stay on topic in a conversation? I know I do. For me, a simple, straightforward conversation with my Nana can be rare. Even just a quick phone call to ask her a question can turn into an hour conversation that has nothing to do with the reason for the phone call. So, if you've ever wondered why older adults may do this, hopefully this presentation will provide you with an explanation for why the older adults in our lives have the tendency to have scattered conversation and to talk our ears off. And no, it is not because they want to annoy you. So, what is verbosity? Well, off topic verbosity is defined as extended speech that is lacking in focus or coherence and is a characteristic of the speech production of some elderly adults. Verbosity is characterized by the failure to maintain focus in a conversation. Often the conversation begins one way, but quickly becomes a loosely connected series of topics, largely irrelevant to the initial conversation topic. The content of verbose speech is usually personally relevant information to the individual, but it lacks the narrative flow, jumping from one topic to the next. It has been speculated that these changes in speech may be related to the age related changes in inhibition. This leads us to briefly discuss the inhibitory deficit hypothesis that we all know so well. As we know, aging is associated with a decline in the inhibitory mechanism of attention. So, older adults do not inhibit irrelevant information as well as us younger adults. They have a greater difficulty in suppressing irrelevant information and ignoring distracting information. Thus, the inhibitory deficit hypothesis has been put forward to propose that a decline in cognitive functioning, specifically for inhibition in the frontal lobe, is the underlying cause for off topic verbosity in older adults. Thus, this leads us to my thesis, which is an analysis of how age related declines in inhibition mediate age related increases in the verbosity of older adults. So, the first study we will look at is a study conducted by Arbuckle and Gold looking at aging, inhibition, and verbosity. So, the purpose of this study was to determine whether off topic verbosity is a manifestation of a more general problem of inhibiting irrelevant stimuli. They hypothesized that a specific age related decline in the ability to inhibit task irrelevant thoughts underlies the age related increases in off topic speech. There were 205 participants aged between 61 and 90 years old. So, Arbuckle and Gold selected three cognitive tests to measure the ability to inhibit task irrelevant thoughts. They used the Wisconsin card sorting test, the trail making test, and the controlled word association test. So through these tests, they looked at the perseveration errors, the time needed to complete Form A and B, and the amount of unique words produced as measures of inhibition. And lastly, they used the life history interview to test whether or not there was verbosity. So each answer that went off target, that is, that contained any extra information, was scored as an instance of verbosity. So they found that high perseveration errors on the WCST, excessive time to complete letter number alternations on Form B of the trail making test, and lower production of words beginning with a given letter on the fluency measure were all associated with higher verbosity scores. When they conducted a factor analysis, and all the cognitive measures were reduced down to a single factor, the relationship maintained, suggesting it was a common feature of requiring inhibition that underlied the relationship with verbosity. So, quick interpretation, the findings of this study demonstrate that off topic verbosity in older adults is associated with age related changes in inhibition abilities, specifically in those required to suppress competing responses and to clear the short term memory system of unnecessary information. These findings provide support toward the theory that age related deficits in inhibitory mechanisms underlie off target speech in older adults. So the next study we will look at is the role of inhibition in age-related off-topic verbosity, not access but deletion and restraint functions, conducted by Yin and Peng. So the purpose of this study was to examine the role of different inhibition functions on the age-related increases in off-topic verbosity. So there's three. There's obviously access, deletion, and restraint, which we did discuss in lecture. So experiment one investigated whether or not age-related off-topic verbosity is associated with the pre-mechanism of inhibition, which is your access function. And experiment two investigated whether age-related off-topic verbosity is related to a post mechanism, which would be the deletion or restraint functions. So for experiment one, like I just said, it was conducted to investigate whether age-related off-topic verbosity is related to pre-mechanism deficits of inhibition in older adults. So they hypothesized that if age-related off-topic verbosity is related to pre-mechanisms of inhibition, the older adults with high levels should experience more interference from the outside irrelevant stimuli. So there are 59 older adults, age range 60 to 90, and 62 younger adults, age range from 18 to 28. So for this experiment, they used the referential communication task, where the participant and the experimenter were given two identical sets of stimuli, which were abstract pictures composed of tangram puzzles in two different sequences. So the participant must exchange descriptive information with the experimenter about the unfamiliar abstract figures presented on the pictures in order for the participant to arrange the pictures in front of them to form the sequence that matches the experimenters. So there was two conditions, non-interfered interfered condition, which no outside irrelevant stimuli were present, so each participant were required to rearrange four pictures that were in front of them based on the feedback from the experimenter sequence. And for the interfered condition, there were six pictures presented instead, two of which were the interference pictures, and they were asked to ignore them and only rearrange the four target pictures. So the results of the study were that the older adults compared to the younger adults had much greater scores of item verbosity and extent of off-topic verbosity. The results revealed no differences between the two levels of the interference condition, which this indicates that the off-topic verbosity of the older adults did not correlate with pre-mechanism of inhibition, so the access function. So for experiment two, this was looking at whether or not age-related off-topic verbosity is caused by deficits in the post mechanism of inhibition. So they hypothesized that the homogeneous homogeneous condition would activate more irrelevant information than would the heterogeneous condition. Thus, it would require great ability to delete irrelevant information. If age-related off-topic verbosity were correlated with the deletion function of inhibition, more off-topic verbosity would be expected in the homogeneous condition. So the participants were the exact same ones as the first experiment. So they used the self-involved event interview. So the task was that the test paradigm generated either previously relevant but currently irrelevant information or induced strong but inappropriate information from the participant. So three questions about different experiences in one's life are presented, and the participants were instructed to think about their answers. They were then asked to answer one of the questions randomly. So this task did two things. It activated information from the other two questions that became irrelevant. So this was information that would have to be deleted. And the self-involved questions induced strong but inappropriate responses, which is information that would have had to be restrained. So there is two conditions. There's the homogeneous, which is the content activated by the different questions were similar. So similar questions were asked. And the heterogeneous, which was the content activated by the different questions were not similar. So the results of the study were that the older adults compared to the younger adults had much greater scores for item verbosity and the extent of off-topic verbosity. The off-topic verbosity in the homogeneous condition was higher than that in the heterogeneous condition for older adults, but not for young adults. So this suggests that the homogeneous group produced more irrelevant information, and the older adults could not accurately delete it. This indicates that age-related off-topic verbosity is closely related to the post mechanism of inhibition. So, a quick interpretation: deficits in inhibition likely lead to age related off topic verbosity in older adults. And off topic verbosity produced by older adults is closely related to the post mechanism of inhibition, the deletion and restraint functions. So, a quick summary of my presentation. So, off topic verbosity in older adults is associated with age related changes in the disinhibition of irrelevant and competing information, and that age related declines in the post inhibition mechanism, deletion, and restraint functions may have the greatest impact on the verbosity of older adults. And here are my references. Thank you so much for watching and listening to me mix up a couple of my words. Thank you.